Oh, now all of a sudden everyone's concerned about what Kirk Cameron believes? Welcome back to the 511 show, and this is a video that's been going viral over the last 24 hours, and it's Kirk Cameron talking about his views on annihilationism. Now, everyone's freaking out because Kirk Cameron is essentially giving ode to an idea that is woefully unbiblical, and we'll talk about this here in a second, but I want to take a pause here because I might have a take here that most people aren't going to have regarding this whole conversation, is that why is it now all of a sudden people are worried about Kirk Cameron's beliefs and whether they're biblical or not? Because he said a lot of wildly unbiblical things over the course of the last few years that I have kind of marked him as someone to avoid in more recent months, in the last couple of years certainly. But there seems to be a progression in the things that Kirk Cameron says that he now believes that are woefully different than what Kirk Cameron used to believe. So those of you guys who don't know who this guy is, he was a former child actor. He was a pretty solid star back in like the 80s and the 90s. Became a big Christian back during that time period. And then he starred in a film series called the Left Behind series, which if you guys want to see it, it's on Tubi if you want to check it out in your own time. But essentially it was a series about the tribulation, the 70th week of Daniel, the 7-year tribulation, about the rapture and then the Antichrist and all of this stuff. It's an interesting series. I definitely think it's thought-provoking. Looking back on it now, there's definitely some things in there that they got wrong, but let's be honest, back in like 1999, I don't think that things had progressed to a point where people could really see what was actually going on. So it's not the most biblically accurate story, but it's an interesting, thought-provoking one at best. But over the last several years, Kurt has kind of flipped on many beliefs that he once upheld and no longer believes them anymore. And for a longest while, people had given him a pass because it seems like he had been drifting into 5-point Calvinism. So this is a guy who several years ago was a dispensationalist. Part of the reason why he did the Left Behind series is because he believed in a pre-tribulation rapture. But ever since then, over the last several years, he has now denounced dispensationalism. He's denounced the pre-tribulation rapture. He's denounced the idea of a literal 1,000-year reign of Christ. He's flipped on what he believes the nation of Israel to be. He doesn't believe the nation of Israel is the Israel that exists to this day. He believes that Israel is now the church. And a lot of people have kind of given him a pass on a lot of this because, like I said, they assumed that he was drifting into Calvinism, so that there was no problem in their eyes. So when he was going on talking about, the Calvinist belief that you have to be given faith, that faith in and of itself is the gift, that God has to select you, be one of his elect in order to be saved, and the overwhelming majority of people simply are not going to be elect, so that means they're not going to be saved. That's what Calvinism teaches, right? People had no problem with that. But all of a sudden, he talks about annihilationism, and everyone completely freaks out. And I was like, why are we only freaking out right now? It's like this has been progressing here for a while. When he was spouting off Calvinist mumbo jumbo, no one batted an eye about it whatsoever. But now all of a sudden that we're going deep into the wildly unbelievable biblical beliefs, now we need to draw in here. So for those of you guys who don't know what annihilationism is, it is this alternative view of what happens to the wicked in the final judgment, where instead of spending an eternity in hell in the lake of fire, which the Bible says is what happens to the wicked and the unrighteous, it is this twisted belief that, no, you're just going to, your soul's going to like explode or something, and then you'll just cease to exist. And then that will be the end of it, right? And some people have adopted this because they think that this is a more fair punishment for for the wicked people who have rejected Jesus Christ, rather than them basically spending all of eternity burning in a lake of fire that they're never ever going to get out of ever, right? So I'm gonna let him talk about why he suddenly believes in this, and I'll go to explain this a little bit more, why this is not biblical idea at all.
Get down to it.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on this?
So my position, as it stands today, and again, we're the beauty of this is that we're always learning and growing, right? So I'm open to new light. If you guys have a position that you can share with me, I will gladly change my mind. I used to hold the.
No, I will say this. There's aspects of my faith where I'm learning and growing, and I've taken new perspective on things that I didn't previously know before, especially over the last few months. The problem is that these are ideas that are based on the Bible and what the Bible says, and finding patterns in the Bible that makes things a lot clearer about how all this is going to end. Just throwing out ideas and beliefs and endorsing them if they don't have any biblical backing, that is a completely different scenario here where you're treading dangerous territory at that point. But I'll continue.
Position of conscious eternal torment, because that's just what I was taught by people that I love and trust. I've learned that there are other positions, and a very robust argument can be made for conditionalism or annihilationism, as Edward Fudge posits here. And it fits the character of God, in my understanding, more than the conscious eternal torment position.
Now, he's going to explain why here in a second, but I want to stop here with what he just said there. He says that he's more conditioned to believe annihilationism because it better fits his understanding of the character of God. First of all, when you start talking about Calvinism, especially 5-point Calvinism, you're already perverting the character of God in a very, very dangerous way, because essentially what you're saying is that God created the overwhelming majority of humanity to be damned from the very beginning, and that only a minuscule few of the elect are actually going to be saved, right? And then you're talking about limited atonement, this belief that Jesus didn't actually die for everyone, that he only died for the elect, and they're the unelect, he didn't die for their sins. And some people go even a step further to say that Jesus actually hates the majority of the world, that because they pervert what one verse says about Jacob and Esau, they say that, well, actually God hates a lot of people too. So when you get into Calvinism, you're already perverting and distorting the character of God in a big, big way. But let's talk about what he mentioned here. There are a lot of people out there who have this belief that essentially they think that hell, the lake of fire, is unfair. It's an unfair punishment to those who simply rejected Jesus Christ, right? However, that's downplaying in a big, big way the severity of what it means to truly reject God. And here's what I want to say. People think that hell is, well, God sends you to hell because, you are a bad person. No, that's not what it means. When we talk about the concept of hell and the lake of fire, you send yourself there. And what I mean by that is that God has created an extremely easy, extremely simple way to avoid any thought of everlasting punishment to begin with. All you have to do is believe in his son and his death, burial, and resurrection, and you will be spared from all acts of eternal punishment and torment just by believing in Jesus. But there's so many people out there who simply don't want to do that because in their hearts, they hate God. They hate Christ. And the last thing that they want to do is listen to God when it comes to anything. They don't want to do anything that he has said, which is why you have so many people who embrace things that are completely against the nature of God. Perfect example. Why you think so many people support the LGBTQ community, right? Excuse me. Why do you think so many people support the LGBTQ community, right? It's a community that is openly and not even subtly, hostilely anti-God and anti-Christ in every verifiable metric. Yet there are some people, and this is the sad reality, a lot of people are going to die and go to hell for the sole reason that they thought that the LGBTQ community was the hill to die on. That if God didn't accept the gays and the trans and the non-binaries and all these group of people who hate him, then, you know what, I don't want to be with God anyway. So I'm fine with going to hell because at least I'm with better people. This is what some people will tell themselves. And the sad part is that a lot of people will actually end up in hell because they refuse to follow God solely on the issue of the LGBTQ. That's a sad reality, but it's true. And when you see how simple it is to be saved, and you see the rate that people go to reject salvation, it's not that God is unfair by sending people to the lake of fire. It's that people hate God so much that they would rather go to the lake of fire than be in the presence of God for eternity, because that's what hell is. That's what eternal torment truly is. It is being separated from God for an eternity. And when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, if you're someone who right now, who's still breathing right now, and you say to yourself, well, you know what? I want nothing to do with God whatsoever. I want nothing to do with Jesus Christ whatsoever. You're making the choice right now that you want to live a life completely separated from God, and you have the ability to do that right now. The problem is that the internal consequence of living a life without God is that God is going to separate you from his presence for all eternity. But in the grand scheme of things, what's really happening? He's giving you exactly what you want. You didn't want Christ. You didn't want God while you were living. So now that you're dead, you're going to get exactly what you want, which is an eternity completely separated from him. And what you're going to realize is that a world without God isn't the paradise and the utopia you've been led to believe that it is. But let's finish up with Kirk here, because he's going to explain why he favors this position.
Because it brings in the mercy of God together with the justice of God. It doesn't leave judgment out. It is just, but it also fits with the Old Testament picture of the fate of the wicked, which is to be destroyed, it is to die, and it is to perish, not live forever in an eternal barbecue. And the classic verses that used to get me into eternal torment, you know, the punishment, everlasting destruction, fits beautifully with a destruction, punishment, judgment that is irreversible and lasts forever. That is the eternalness of that punishment and that destruction.
So, based on Kirk's estimation here, it makes more sense in his estimation, based on what he's read and what he believes the character of God to be, for God to essentially, instead of throwing you in a lake of fire where you be tormented day and night forever and ever with no chance of escape, that, it's better for him to basically just destroy your soul and then you cease to exist, because in that estimation, there's more mercy in that than eternal punishment. Well, the problem is you didn't have to look back into God was so willing to prevent people from going and experiencing hell in the lake of fire to begin with, that he literally sent his only begotten son to dying on the cross to take the wrath of God upon him, so that you didn't have to take the wrath of God later on yourself. So I understand what he's thinking, and in the context of, well, it's merciful to just, wipe somebody out of existence rather than give them everlasting torment. But at the same time, God has already gone out of his way to show us extreme mercy by what Jesus did on the cross, to the point where if people are still rejecting God's mercy at that point, you can't say with a straight face that God would be unloving or unjust by giving them over to eternal, everlasting punishment. Because that's what they chose. And that's the part that a lot of people seem to forget here. But let's talk about this here. I want to go to the book of Matthew. This is a perfect example. So this is Matthew 25, and I'm going to do a separate video on this because this is a very, very interesting parable. It's the parable of the sheep and the goats. And essentially what happens here, for context, is that at the end of the tribulation, when Jesus returns, he's going to essentially return, and before the millennial reign begins, he's going to judge the entire world by separating them into two categories, sheep and goats. The sheep, the ones who followed him, the ones who helped the Christians and the Jews during the tribulation, those people get to inherit the millennial kingdom of Jesus Christ. The ones who refuse to do so, and really when you look at this group specifically, we're talking about unbelievers who survived the tribulation. They didn't take the mark of the beast, however, they did not put their faith in Jesus Christ either. And they didn't help Jews and Christians who were being persecuted. They just so managed to survive to the end of the tribulation. Well, hate to break it to you, but just because you survive the Great Tribulation does not mean that good things are going to happen to you afterwards, because in your heart you still rejected Jesus Christ. So he talks about this in parable Matthew 25:31-46. I'm just going to read through this one pretty quickly here. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the holy angels are with him, he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him. He will separate them from one another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on the right hand and the goats on the left. And then the king will say to those on his right, "Come and you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me." And then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when do we see you hungry, feed you, thirsty, and give you drink? And when do we see a stranger or take you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" And the king will answer him, "Assuredly I say to you, as much as you have done to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me." And then he flips it on the other hand for the goats. He says here in verse 41 that then he will also say to those on his left hand, "Depart from me, you accursed, into everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels." Understand this. At the end of the tribulation, all of the surviving unbelievers of the world, the ones that went through 7 years of God's wrath and still refused to place their faith in Jesus Christ, all of those unbelievers who survive, even if they don't take the mark of the beast, they're still going into everlasting torment, as Jesus says here, prepared for the devil and his angels. Now again, in the context of everlasting torment, God's not just going to annihilate Satan and the fallen angels who rebelled against him. They're going to be in the lake of fire being tortured for all eternity. All of the fallen angels, all of the demons, all of the demonic hordes, and Satan himself will be experiencing everlasting torment for their entire rebellion that they have caused against mankind since the beginning. And what does it say here? "For I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger and you did not take me in. Naked you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison you did not visit me." And they will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you or hungry or thirsty, a stranger, naked, sick, or in prison, and did not minister to you?" And he will answer them, "Assuredly I will say unto you, as much as you did not do to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me." So what he's saying here is that all of the Christians, the tribulation saints, the Jewish people during the tribulation period that were forsaken, the ones that were persecuted by the Antichrist and his forces, the ones out there who essentially sat on the fence the entirety of the tribulation and didn't bother to help those who were being persecuted, Jesus is going to say, "Away from me into everlasting fire, prepare for the devil and his angels." And he says again, "These will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." So let's jump ahead one more verse here. Let's go to Revelation 20 here for a second. So in Revelation 20 here, we get a future look of Satan's final rebellion. At the end of the tribulation, Satan is bound and he is cast into the abyss for 1,000 years, where he is not allowed to deceive anyone in the world for 1,000 years. So he's locked up in the abyss, completely separated from the world. But after 1,000 years, he will be released for a short season. He gathers everyone for the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather battle against Christ in Israel for one last opportunity. And he loses hilariously. Let's go here to verse 7. And then the 1,000 years have expired. Satan will be released from his prison. He will go out and deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them to battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. Another great point here. Even in the millennial reign of Jesus Christ, 1,000 years of heavenly peace, there are still going to be people who rebel against Jesus. There's a reason why these people are given away to everlasting torment, because this is how far they are willing to go to spite Christ. But it says here, they went up as the bread on the earth, surrounded the camp of the saints in the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. And the devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire, where brimstone and lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet, which is the Antichrist and the false prophet, are, where they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. This is the fate of Satan, the fallen angels, and all of those who side with Satan against Jesus Christ. They are tossed into a lake of fire forever, where they will be tormented day and night forever and ever, and it will not stop. So this idea that God will not cast away humanity or the wicked in the same manner that he would do Satan and the angels, you're just not believing what the Bible actually says. And then it says here right above, below that, verse 11, and then I saw a great white throne, and him who sat on it, from whom the face of the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before God. The books were open, and another book was open, which is the book of life. And the dead was judged according to their works, by the things which was written in the books. And the sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and Hades delivered the dead who were in them, and they were judged each according to his works. Then death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death, and anyone who was not found written in the book of life was also cast into the lake of fire, which is the second death. So what do we see here? All of those who rejected Christ, all of those who did not believe in Jesus, did not believe in his death, burial, and resurrection, they will be given over to the great white throne judgment, while they will be cast into the lake of fire forever and ever with no point of escape. None. And some people look at this and they say to themselves, oh, that's horrific. Why would he do something like that? It's like, no, why wouldn't the people simply believe in Christ when it was so easy for them to be saved? God gave them the easiest path to avoid this fate, and they were the ones who refused to do so. And what is the easy path to salvation? It's this. John 5:24. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that heareth my word and believeth on him that sent me have everlasting life, shall not come into condemnation, but is passed from death unto life. All you have to do is believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved. And sadly, so many people are going to say, no, I won't do it. Well, I hate to break this to you. Guess what? There's consequences to that decision. That there is no third option on the table for you. You either choose Jesus or you choose the devil. You're either going to go to heaven or you're going to go to the lake of fire. There is no third option. And what it really comes down to is that there's so many people out there who want there to be a third option. They want there to be, somewhere where I don't have to believe in Jesus, but I don't get punished for it too. And it's like, I'm sorry, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It is never going to exist. You have a binary choice. And by refusing to make the right one, you've made your decision. Now you have to deal with the consequences. Let me get your guys' thoughts here on Kirk Cameron. What do you think about his recent change in a lot of his doctrine? A lot of it is still reformed and Calvinist, but as we see here, he's starting to add new things to it. And he seems to be just going down this rabbit hole where he doesn't believe any of the correct doctrine that he used to believe. So now he's essentially believing almost anything except for a literal interpretation of what the Bible actually says, and it's getting him into trouble. So you guys tell me what you guys think about this. We're going to head out of here. We'll see you guys for the next episode. Adios, goodbye, and good night.